Sweet. Cool. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fundamental Escape podcast. I am your host, Mark Fitzgerald, and I'm here today with a bit of a bonus episode with my friends Andrew and Amy, who are the Pondjumpers, who basically decided on a whim to jump ship from New Zealand and start traveling for up to 6 months, maybe longer, I don't know. But do you guys want to just say hi and introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sure. Hello. I'm Andrew Robinson and my partner Amy.
Hello.
She's the quiet one. So we are from the North Island of New Zealand, and after not much thought whatsoever, decided to leave work and home and country and family and everything to do whatever kind of arrived in our path.
Cool. Okay. You sort of skipped over that real quickly, so let's kind of slow that down a little bit. Do you want to maybe just explain the process? Like, you know, it's not every day that people kind of just decide to go, hey, let's just start traveling randomly. Like, was there any, what sort of led to that decision?
Well, I grew up on a farm in the Bay of Islands with people from all around the world. So I kind of always had a yearning to travel and get out there and see what they were seeing in our country, I guess. And Amy's loved cars since she was, I don't know how old, and she drives cars as a hobby in New Zealand races. So she had booked tickets to the Formula One in Monza and convinced me, difficultly of course, to go to the Formula One with her. And after a bad day at work, I dropped the seed and said, we should stay in Europe. And she kind of jokingly, 2 or 3 minutes kind of passed by, and that was that. And then the next morning, 12 hours later, we kind of brought it up again. And that was when I called Mum and said, hey Mum, you know that 10-day trip to Italy we've got booked? She's like, yep. It's like, we're not coming back. So that was that was kind of how it all eventuated.
Sweet. So like, was it, I'm curious, maybe Amy can jump in as well maybe, but like was it sort of one of those things where you like made the decision and then that was it, there was no turning back sort of thing?
Pretty much. I mean, we were both sort of on our way home, and as soon as he mentioned it, I, you know how a normal person would process something over and think of pros and cons and have some sort of hesitation, you know, like natural fight or flight mode with any big decision. But I didn't have that at all. And I just thought, you know what, there's nothing really holding us back. So let's do it and let's see what's out there. We were in jobs we were fantastic at, but it wasn't fulfilling to the point where you could sit back and say, I'm excited to go to work every morning. Whereas when you're traveling, you wake up and you're excited for every day because it's completely different, and the people you meet, and yeah, so it was kind of a no-brainer for me really to jump on board with his crazy scheme.
So, like, I mean, you guys are both obviously were in sales. Like, was it that you sold the idea to each other sort of thing, or?
No, there wasn't any sales involved in that one. I mean, I've sold ideas to her many a time, but that one was literally just a drop of the seed, and the seed just kind of germinated itself and grew overnight. And we didn't speak to each other about it at all, but I brought it up the next morning and said, I'm still seriously thinking about not coming back from Europe. And she said, yeah, so am I. And that was it. So, yeah. Then cool. It was just to plan out what the actual trip was going to entail.
Sweet. So yeah, I was curious, like, what your sort of friends and family thought about it. Like, how did they sort of react?
My dad was all for it. As I say, he grew up with people, or I grew up with people from around the world through him. And Mum, she was just, I don't know if she was more excited to see me leave the country and not have to kind of, you know, see my face for the next 6 months, or if she was more excited for me to go and see the world. But as for everyone else, I suppose my grandma was actually the saddest. I could kind of see it or hear it when I told her. She's kind of sounded a little bit sad to, you know, see me gone for 6 months. Yeah. But as for pretty much everybody else, they just thought we were absolutely crazy.
What about you, Amy? What about your friends and family?
When I moved to Auckland, I kind of was in this awkward social recluse where I'd work, go home, and that was really it. My friends in Wellington thought it was as Andrew's friends thought, absolutely bonkers. My mum's a bit different. She's how do I describe her? Like a pirate bikie. With she's done everything with her life, so I mean, she was more than happy to sort of let me spread my wings and do the same sort of thing and experience, a taste of what she had in her time. So she was all for it. Yeah, no, it was cool. It was good. It was nice to have that kind of backing as well, because then you're not, just going out on your own and knowing that people, because a few people were sitting back with what we wanted to do and being like, yeah, no, it's not going to happen. It's going to be a lot of work. And with those people that think you're going to, fail as such, it's nice to have the support of the others that you truly care about to kind of back you the whole way.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, totally. And that's, I mean, Andrew, obviously we've known each other for a couple of years sort of thing. And that's one thing I totally admire about you, is that you have this tenacity where you just don't see obstacles. You're just like, we can do this. And that's a lot of the conversations I've been having on my podcast with different people. It seems to be this recurring theme of people becoming comfortable in their own skin and finding their authentic self sort of thing. And you guys sort of both indicated that you had these jobs that were good jobs and they paid okay or well or whatever, but it was just kind of it just was not fulfilling sort of thing.
As Amy said, it's just not fulfilling enough to actually continue doing it, even though we enjoyed the job. It was not. We didn't wake up and go, I can definitely do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah. But the sad thing is so many people are in that position, but they've been brought up in a way where they think that's the norm, that's the expectation. You go to work to pay off the debts that you get so you can have a nice house, and it's this never-ending cycle, really, of expectation that we've all been brought up to, and basically it's been bred into our system. So we kind of want to break that by showing people, firstly, if we can do it, there's no excuse that you can't. And secondly, we've met so many people along the way that are doing that as well on a daily basis. So it's really enlightening to see that not everyone's a sheep and just following what they think should be done.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I'm keen, obviously, to jump into some of the people you've met and talk about things you've learned or learning, stuff like that. But I just want to kind of just go into the whole what was the time frame between the time you made the decision and when you're on the plane? What was that? How long was that?
It was about 6 weeks, I think. So
that's crazy.
I don't know.
That is crazy.
To me, that seems like a really long time.
It was a really long time. When you're sitting at work and all you want to be doing is something that your heart's yearning to do. It's a long time.
And in sales, anybody who's been in sales will know that once you don't have a reason to be there anymore, sales drop, full stop, and you can't.
Yeah.
And even if you kind of consciously want to make more sales, you still can't do it because the back of your mind says, you're going overseas with absolutely no plan whatsoever in 6 weeks, so you don't need to do this.
Yeah. So was there a moment, say at the airport or when you're on the plane, where you kind of looked at each other and were like, holy crap, we're actually doing this. This is a real thing.
No, I think it's just every country that we've been arriving into, it's been an ongoing joke where we've said, we're in Ireland.
Yeah.
We're sleeping in Ireland. I think the first one was when we first arrived in Rome, and I'm like, we're in Rome. We're on the other side of the world. Considering the furthest I'd been from New Zealand was Australia, to say that I was in Europe felt weird, I think would be the only word to kind of describe it.
Okay, cool. So you mentioned obviously going to Rome and things like that. So do you want to maybe just map out where you've been so far and how long you've stayed in each place?
Yeah, absolutely. We flew into Rome and arrived with a guy, Andrea, who was absolutely awesome. And I suppose he was kind of the first eye-opener to what the trip was going to be like, on the basis that we got to see places that tourists wouldn't see and do things that tourists wouldn't do, including down to one of his friends. I think every second person in Italy was called Andrea, but one of his friends was also called Andrea. My name in Italian is Andrea, so it was kind of humorous. But he introduced us to raw seafood, which I was fine with until the raw shrimps and raw prawns came out. And we looked at each other and we were hesitant, but we tried them and they were absolutely delicious. So since then, the trips entailed snails and different
wow.
cheeses which you'd never even think of eating, and everything has been delicious. It's just about getting past that, as you say, that fear of kind of going, you know what's the worst that can happen? It's going to taste really bad and I'll probably spit it out and offend somebody, but hey.
Yeah.
And it's just been fine. So we arrived with him, spent 4 days in Rome, and we needed to get to Milan to go to Monza, and we hitchhiked up. In, I suppose, like New Zealand motorways, you can't really cross them. So we got dropped off on the wrong side of the highway by a trucker with nowhere to go. So we had to change our direction a little bit, and we got picked up by another guy who was going in the opposite direction to what we needed to do by about an hour. But he was absolutely awesome and put us up in his house for 2 nights. And that was absolutely awesome. His name was Enrico, and he had his family, and Mum was extremely sick, and even so he'd just kind of, would just let us do our own thing and go with the flow, which was pretty cool. And from there, we then wrote a sign, because we've been writing signs to everywhere, obviously, to get from A to B. Wrote a sign to Milan, and got picked up by a guy who was probably our most interesting ride. Amy was stuck in the middle of the back seat with his cat.
Oh wow!
In a container on her right with some strawberry and chili plants on top of the cat, and her bag on her left.
And it was a tiny cat. I cannot, I'm a small person. I'm not a big girl by any means at all, but my shoulders were pressed into the center of me, and my legs were kind of tucked up behind me, because not only were there plants on top of this cat, they were all over the floor wells as well. And then to top it off, Giorgio had been on holiday, so he had all his bags in the back, and then Andrew had stacked his on top of that, so my head was kind of pushed forward. So I was in this awkward kind of fetal position for 3.5 hours of my life.
Oh, wow.
But it was amazing. He was one of the coolest people we've met.
Coolest guys we met.
Yeah.
Then we spent 4 days in Monza with a couple. She was Russian, couldn't speak much Italian, or any Italian. He was Italian, couldn't speak any Russian. They both spoke very broken English, and all they did the entire 4 days was argue.
They were married.
So
wait, they couldn't speak each other's language?
No.
All they could do was speak broken English, and all they did was argue. So that was probably the less exciting trip, apart from the Formula One, obviously.
Yeah.
And then we went up to a place called Lago di Como, which is Lake Como, as English speakers.
We went over to Lecco.
Yeah. So we went to Lecco, which is it's on the same lake. So anybody traveling to Italy, I highly recommend it. It's absolutely beautiful, although expensive. So, although that's because it borders on Switzerland, which is probably the most expensive country in the world. People joke about that, but it's not a joke. So we kind of skipped Switzerland, and one night, or the last night in Switzerland we were going to spend, we asked a couple if there was a place where we could set up our emergency tent. And as Amy would say, the emergency tent is a sheet of plastic with a piece of string, literally.
Was that the photo that you posted?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, that looked awesome.
Both ends were completely open. Like, it was honestly... I can't.
It was cold.
It was cold. We only had to use it once. So.
Yeah, like one thing that's kind of interesting to me in your stories already is that the whole idea of how, like in New Zealand, we live in this country where there's really not much to complain about. Like we go into buildings that are like air conditioned and we have space to walk around and things like that. And you guys are in these situations where you're like cramped up and like in these crazy tents and stuff, but you're loving it and you're not complaining. Yeah. Like, I'm sure you might be complaining a bit, but like you it's like the joy of what you're doing seems to outweigh the obstacle sort of thing.
I think every obstacle that I've come across anyway, I don't complain about it on the basis that it's my war story for the next day. So it's kind of my bragging rights, like I've slept underneath a piece of paper next to some German war tents. Some German war
it's also creating memories too, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we but we went up to this couple and we said, hey, do you know where there's a place where we can set up this, piece of plastic, basically? and they heard the Kiwi accents, and she loves Kiwis, so she said, "No, you two are way too adorable to, I can't let you sleep underneath a piece of plastic. You've got to come back and live with us." So we went and stayed with them for 2 days, and they treated us like their children, which was absolutely amazing. And then we hitchhiked from there through to Frankfurt in Germany, and spent 10 days in Germany at Frankfurt and the Nürburgring, which was exciting. So that was good fun. We got driven around the Nürburgring by who I'm 99.9% sure was the Stig from Top Gear. And the only reason we can say 99.9% is because I don't think he's allowed to say in his contract that he was the Stig.
Yeah.
And then up through Aarhus, through Denmark. We got from Frankfurt to Aarhus, which is probably the length of the North Island of New Zealand, in 1 day, hitchhiking. And I think that was a pretty cool.
We'd made like 2 days.
Yeah, we'd planned an entire 2 days and a bit to get there on time, and we got there in 12 hours. So that was was probably one of the cooler parts of hitchhiking. And then obviously there's been the times where we've had to sit around and wait for an hour and a half in rain hitchhiking. And then spent a couple of days in Aarhus in Denmark, up through into Norway.
Which is where we finally got to use the tent. By the way, when we went to the top of Denmark, before you take the ferry over, there's a little place called Hirtshals.
Hirtshals, yeah.
And we went up to some, like, we've been really lucky. People have been pretty generous in helping us out. I'm not sure whether it's because we're Kiwi or because there's genuinely a lot of good people still out there. But we went up to this camping site and we basically said, look, we've got this piece of plastic, we just need to set it up. And the prices were ridiculous. So that's when we went on a little, it would have been a good K walk uphill to where the lighthouse was based, and found this little forest next to the German war trenches and set up there. It was pretty scary. I didn't get much sleep because being an overthinker, I'm like, there's going to be German zombies coming out to get me at midnight. But yeah, no, it was an experience. But unfortunately, the tent only lasted the one and only night.
Yeah.
But we struck some gold in Norway where when we got over there, it was pretty late by the time we managed to hitchhike to Stavanger. Stavanger, was it?
Etna.
Was it Etna?
Yeah, it was just south of Stavanger, which is kind of just south of one of the main cities. Starts with B. I can't remember it right now. But yeah, we managed to hitchhike up to there, where a lovely family gave us a tent, which we used for a few nights, and ended up saving our lives on a place called Trolltunga, which I suppose kind of is the last part of our trip so far, other than flying to Dublin, where we are at the moment, obviously.
Yeah.
But you've seen the photos of Trolltunga, Mark?
I think I have, yeah.
It's the rock that looks like Pride Rock from The Lion King. So
nice. yeah.
It's had a lot of attention lately. Unfortunately, I think it was 3 weeks ago now, an Australian girl fell off it and died.
It's a 700-metre drop, so you wouldn't want to be silly on top of it.
Yeah, it's 1,100 metres above sea level. It's over 22k round trip return, but it's beautiful. It's really beautiful, but I definitely recommend being prepared as the key thing for that.
yeah, definitely.
The weather changes quickly, so we're still uploading the video on this one here, or still editing the video on this one here. But when we arrived at the bottom of Trolltunga, there was another guy who we ended up calling the mountain goat because he could just walk and walk and walk and not care. And he was Turkish, but his tent was broken. So we said, why don't you come and sleep in our tent, which turned out to be a good idea. And about 8k into the 11k hike, there was another guy called Steven, an American guy, and he was just kind of taking his time, which at that point wasn't the worst idea, to just take your time and enjoy the views. However, at about the 9k, so with about 2k left to go, there was a snowstorm that kind of set in. So we're 1,100 meters above sea level, 9 kilometers of rocky terrain away from the closest bit of help, with 4 guys, a little bit of food, a tent, and a wet sleeping bag in the middle of a snowstorm. So that was kind of that's probably my favorite war story, Mark, is that one there.
Yeah.
We told the mountain goat, who spoke, his name was Mustafa. He spoke very little English. We recommended to him to stay with Stephen so that Stephen could, because he had at that point mentally shut down.
Basically, every 300 meters that we would gain, he would fall back another 50 from us. So while three of us felt good and we were fine, and I mean,
Cold.
we were cold, but as long as you kept moving, that wasn't an issue. But Stephen was moving so slowly that the cold was really getting to him, and he'd kind of given up a wee bit. And I mean, he had everything he'd even need, but
We called him Stephen the Prepared because he had every. Yeah, he had the tent, he had the food, he had the changes of clothes and everything, but he was just at the point where it was kind of, he just wanted to, sit down and chill out, literally. So we recommended the mountain goat go back and hang out with him and make sure that he keeps going while we run ahead and find a place to set up the tent. And the only place we could really find to set up the tent was outside a power station, which we couldn't break into because the glass of that place was just, I don't know if it was bulletproof or not, but it was unbreakable. We tried, obviously. And so we set up this tent on the rocks with a wet sleeping bag, which Amy and I slept on top of under her sleeping bag. And the mountain goat and Stephen the Prepared in our tent next to us with the snowstorm setting ice on top of the tent outside us.
And just a side note, my sleeping bag is rated to 0, which when we brought them, we thought
that's going to be
fine.
good.
That'll be fine.
Yeah.
It would have dropped to well below 0.
Probably -5 down to -10 maybe.
I have to say, I love all the descriptions of the people. It's like it like really paints a picture,
Yeah.
So so how long are you in Ireland for?
Well, I mean,
until we beat them in the World Cup final.
We've just hitchhiked, I think in total now we're just over 4,000 kilometres. So we've got, I mean, when did we come up with the plan for Ireland? We would have been in Germany?
Yeah, about halfway through.
One day we were sitting there and we were kind of thinking about what our long-term sort of goal was. And we'd kind of noticed that a lot of the people that when we were hitchhiking, because we were meeting some amazing people that way, a lot of people would want to pick us up, but they couldn't because they were going different directions, or they were just stopping down the road, or, there's a multitude of things that mean that people who would be willing and able to pick us up couldn't. So we wanted to kind of make it accessible and meet these people that otherwise would have picked us up. So the plan for Ireland is kind of writing a sign that says anywhere and seeing where that takes us. And we've got 3 months to do that. So
yeah.
We'll probably end up. We'll probably end up going through to England and Scotland, and catching up with friends from throughout the UK before flying back to Copenhagen for Christmas.
Oh wow, that's cool. So I'm curious, I mean, you've met these really interesting people and been to these real crazy places and stuff. Is there some of the what are some of the things you've been kind of learning? If you can say, what are some of the things you've been sort of figuring out along the way?
Don't hold back, really. We met one guy yesterday who he was amazing musician. Surprise, surprise! In Dublin, a guy who can play guitar. But he was a construction worker from the time that he was 15 years old, and he did that for 10 years. Quit that to just kind of play guitar, sold everything, and took up guitar, and he's been playing guitar for 7 years, and now he's an absolutely amazing musician, which we've got a video of. But the definition of Pondjumpers on Urban Dictionary, which is kind of cheating, is one who, when faced with adversity, stagnation, or declining quality of life, decides that a fundamental change must be made to evolve the individual, mentally, physically, religiously, philosophically, and a leap of faith, as interpreted by the individual, is made in an effort to make an intimate change in their life to benefit themselves and the ones they love and care for.
Wow!
So we've been trying to kind of.
Did you read that, or was it in your head?
Yeah,
or?
no, I read that. I'm not that good.
I was gonna say, man, I didn't think your memory was that good. I know, but no, that's amazing. I love that, and that sort of that whole idea ties in so much with what I'm doing with my podcasting and these conversations, because it really is about, I'm sort of trying to move out of, like, I've talked a lot about faith and spirituality and things like that, but like I say, this recurring theme is about getting back in touch with your humanity, and it's about making this, fundamental escape, like from, it's this whole idea that you get handed, and I think, Amy, you talked about briefly at the beginning of the conversation, where we sort of get told these sort of ideas like, oh, you're supposed to be practical, you're supposed to like save for a house and all this kind of stuff, and you're just like, this is crazy, and you're just like, no, I just want to enjoy my life, I want to do something different, and I think that's why I find so compelling about what you guys are doing. I think it's just totally amazing.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what we've been trying to find. We've been trying to find people who have done the same thing. I mean, the thing is that we're doing it in the form of travel, but we're trying to encourage other people to do it in the form that makes them comfortable. So it doesn't matter what it is, whether you start your own podcast or you quit a construction job to take up a guitar or whatever you do, as long as you don't wake up every morning and go, I'm so sick of paying off my mortgage for a house that I don't live, that I don't enjoy living in, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I like that you said that. I really, really like that you said that, because there is no cookie cutter thing. It's not like a, one size fits all. It is, like you say, everyone's got their sort of drive, and it was actually the memoir Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert.
Yeah.
Like, she talks about this idea of people say, oh, follow your passion. She's like, oh, that's great, like, if you have a passion. But she's like, what if you don't? Like, a lot of people don't know what they want. And she says, she goes, just follow your gorgeous curiosity, because I think that's enough. And I think that's awesome. I think that's totally sweet. And I think that's what you guys are totally doing.
Yeah.
No, it's really cool. I mean, my first, I guess, I've been sucked into the kind of idealism of, if you've met these steps by a certain age, thus you are successful. I mean, I was a business banker for a few years, and I would see countless amounts, well, actually before I was a business banker, more personal banking, and you'd see countless amounts of young people coming in when they're 22, 23, wanting to get a mortgage and buy a house and kind of being locked in, and you'd have to explain to them, this is the next 30 years of your life. You're locking it in. You're going to have to be, in a job, making sure you can pay off that commitment. And then on the other side of that, when I went into business banking, I was seeing young people who were starting up their own businesses and doing something they were passionate about and they truly believed in. So for me, it was really interesting seeing the contrast between the two different types of people that are out there. And unfortunately, the entrepreneurial type and the people that are out there doing what they love at the moment are the minority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it needs to change, because people are wondering why the world is, I don't think it's a bad place, but I think there's a lot going on that shouldn't be, and people are wondering why that is, and it's because we're all stuck in the same kind of idealism of this is what we should be doing.
The rat race.
The rat race,
Totally. Man, that's awesome. That's so cool that you said that. Yeah, absolutely. And it is like that. It's totally like that. You get brought in, you buy into this idea that, just play it safe, just go for the easy option, whatever, instead of, and you're right with the whole entrepreneurial thing. But I think, you sort of say unfortunately, but I think for people that are entrepreneurial, it's not so unfortunate, because you realize like it doesn't take much to stick out in a world where everyone's just doing the same thing. It's like, to stick out and actually make a difference. It doesn't take too much. Like I say, I've been running my podcast for like 3 months, and we've just hit over 3,000 plays, and it's just like, it's like growing, and it's cool. And like I say, you just got to keep doing it. And I love the fact that you guys totally just did it without, really care. Like, even if you had people going, oh, this is crazy, blah, blah, you just were like, no, this is what we're doing. I think it's great. So, I suppose just to wind down, because we could talk for ages, I guess. But, so, like, what's next? Where do you, like, what's the plan? Like, after the 6 months and stuff, I'm curious to know, like, is it just back home in a normal job, or like, do you want to keep doing other stuff, or like, what's happening?
We're definitely, no, it's not going to be normal stuff.
I kind of knew the answer to that. I was just
well, Amy's always raced cars as a hobby, And as you probably remember, I've always loved cars. So we are going to find a nice BMW Z4. When I say nice, as in crashed BMW Z4.
Wrecked.
Yeah, wrecked BMW.
We're doing this on a budget.
Yeah. And take the engine out of that and put another engine in it and turn that into a race car, basically. And after meeting this guy, Ren, at the Nürburgring, who races for Ferrari, hopefully get him to, come race with us in a couple of the Enduro series in New Zealand. So that's one of the plans is, even if it's $30,000-$40,000, which is extremely cheap for a race car, try and make something that keeps up with something else. And more travel. We've got a plan for Asia, a plan to actually see Scandinavia properly, because it is a beautiful part of the world, but it's expensive. And on a budget, it's kind of difficult to get up there and see it. And then a plan to travel from either South America through to Canada on the west coast, or from Canada down through to South America, still on the west coast.
And I guess with me as well, separately, I've started blogging everything. Like you've had a read of a couple of the ones that I've posted up. So I mean, I'm going to keep doing that, because I'm obviously dealing with some stuff at the same time as trying to travel, and through all the bits and pieces that I looked, because before you start a blog or before you go into a podcast, you obviously do your research, you look around, you see what other people are putting out there, just to make sure that your stuff is going to be relevant and kind of
slightly unique.
Help someone, I guess, was what I was wanting to do. But more than anything else, I kind of just wanted to do it for myself as well. So I'm gonna keep writing that and keep seeing where that kind of takes me and all of that as well, because I'm sure once it kind of takes off, if it does, to be honest, I'm not bothered if it does or doesn't, but if it does, we'll probably meet a lot of interesting people and be able to help people through that as well. So
that's awesome.
When you say future plans, the travel in the cars, the travel in the car, those are projects that we'll work on. But throughout all of that, I think the main thing is we're trying to figure out a way of inspiring other people to do what they love. And I think that will be through video and through blog. So when I say figure out a way, as in try and figure out exactly how to do a video and a blog in a way that other people read it and go, that's it, I want to be a Pondjumper kind of thing. So
yeah.
That's the continuous throughout the projects that we do, is to continuously vlog and blog.
Sweet, cool.